I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about artists and models.
Before we get into this week's film, next week we're going to be watching Nocturama. We've talked a lot about Benello before. I know you saw The Beast pretty recently,
Mhm.
and we had talked about some of his other stuff before. This will be my first Benello film, so I'm excited to get into this universe. And since I am officially on summer break now, Friday was my
All right, yeah.
last official day of school. I can finally get back into watching movies again. So I'm
hmm
very excited to get back in that mode. And I think this is a
hmm
good way to start us off and finally watch some movies again.
Yeah, this is one of two that they have in Criterion, and I saw House of Tolerance the other day, and it was very good. So, and I would say like The Beast is like the best movie of 2023 that came out that year.
It's wild.
I think it's better than Oppenheimer. I think it's better than all that shit. So,
Wow. Okay. Well, I am very excited for this experience.
hmm
But this week we watched we watched Artists and Models with Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, who apparently hated the shit out of each other,
I
according.
think this is like yeah, at like the end of their ropes. I think with each other. I think
Which you can kind
because
of
I think
tell.
if you look at Frank Tashlin would continue to work with Lewis though. If you look, he made like five movies with him in it.
Yeah.
And you say you can kind of tell, but I think they're okay in this movie. They seem fine together. I think
No,
they're fine.
I think they have good chemistry, but there's definitely this sort of undertone of I don't know, there's something about it in the way they interact
hmm
with each other that is just like it's in their eyes, it's in their souls, some sort of true hatred. But they I think they play really well off each other. I don't think
Yeah.
actors necessarily need to like each other to work well together. I think there's plenty of great
No.
cases, like for example, Moonlight, Bruce Willis and uh,
I don't know.
Sybil Sybil Shepherd
Okay.
hated each other, but that kind of worked in the way it was made in the filming, and sort of those interactions kind of made them even better. And so I don't think that takes anything away necessarily from their performances together.
hmm
So I love the two of them together. And of course, Jerry Lewis here, he's
hmm
playing Jerry Lewis, right? He does his Jerry Lewis style
Yeah,
character.
he does the shtick. Yeah, they both do their shticks,
And
right?
Dean
Like
Martin, yeah,
and
same
Dean
thing.
Martin, he sings many songs in the movie. I will say though, the thing about this movie, I was thinking about this movie. Well, I'll say so. A couple points. One, this is like the most with nothing to say movie ever. Like it's like it's kind of a confluence of a lot of like our interests
Yeah.
and things that we like into kind of one movie, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it was kind of like a movie that was made in a lab for us for the show. Uh, and I think Martin Lewis, they're great, they're funny. I again, I think they're fine on them in the movie, but I think that the Shirley MacLaine and Dorothy Malone characters add a lot
Yes.
to that. If you didn't have it, and also Tashlin as well as a director. If you didn't have Tashlin and if you didn't have MacLaine and Malone in the movie, this would probably be like a terrible, boring, completely. And I
Yeah.
think there are like a lot of like Martin Lewis movies, right? Like, and I'm sure a lot of them are really bad. Like, I can imagine like, can you imagine like Lewis and Martin just kind of like standing, kind of like
Yeah.
together, like just kind of like in a, a straight shot of them just kind of like doing their act. I'm sure a lot of the movies are like that, and they're
Mm-hmm.
probably really bad.
I'm quite confident that that is certainly the case when it comes to those two. And I do think that Shirley MacLaine, really in any film, I mean, it's hard to outshine her. There's a reason that the Criterion Collection is a Shirley MacLaine collection. She's one of
She's so
my
good.
favorite actors. I mean, she is just incredible and she puts
She's
110%.
really funny.
She just has this ability to be very funny and yet still get off these very genuine and honest performances, which
hmm
I think she does an incredible job here. And first of all, one of the things I wanted to know about this film is this film it's particularly for a film made in the 1950s, is just really, really horny. I mean, my God,
I suppose so. I guess. I mean, it's yeah.
there's there's a scene very
You know what? You know what? You're right. There are a lot of ladies in the movie. There are a lot of ladies in the movie. I think I agree with you on that. There are a lot of like ladies, like the scene at the end where they're painting on all the ladies. Like
hmm
there are a lot of it's artists and models. So there's a lot of
There's a
models.
lot of
But
like,
like,
there's a lot.
are you were you about to talk to like the opening credit scene?
Yeah,
Yeah, that too.
the opening credit scene, or there's a lot of shots of women's feet. There's a lot of
Hmm.
foot fetishing here.
I
There is
guess.
that
Yeah.
moment early on where Shirley MacLaine and her friend, they live in an apartment together, and for some weird reason, she, not Shirley MacLaine, but the other actress, she had just gotten out of the
Dorothy
shower.
Malone.
Yes, Dorothy Malone, and she is wearing like a towel that literally covers as physically little as possible.
That's true. She's well, I mean, it basically covers up all the bits, right? Like
Barely.
yeah, but there's no nudity in the movie. I mean, there's I guess almost, but yeah. No, it is kind of like a very like it is a relatively like skimpy movie. There's a lot of like skimpiness going on and
Yeah.
her like wearing the Bat Lady suit and like
hmm
Jerry Lewis being like really into and
Into
attracted to the
it.
Bat Lady is interesting because it's kind of like almost kind of like a borderline kind of like leather fetishist kind of
hmm
outfit sort of thing. So I see where you're coming from with that. Um, and yeah, it's just like but I love that. I love
Yeah.
one of the things about this movie that I really love, and I love it, is that the movie is pretty much filmed entirely on sets. The whole
hmm
thing is pretty much
Yeah.
filmed on sets. So that, along with kind of like the performances and the pacing and everything, and all the stuff that we just talked about, basically, it always when I'm watching it, it always feels like the movie is about to like explode. Like it just kind of has this like feel, this kind of like delicateness to it where it just kind of feels like everything is about to like come apart and come undone. And I don't think the movie ever like goes that far, but I just really like that kind of like that on the edge kind of like feeling with the movie. Like it definitely doesn't make it boring. It definitely doesn't make it any kind of like it definitely doesn't make it just kind of like morose or boring. It has kind of like this like kind of like incessant energy where it just kind of feels like, oh man, like it's all gonna the movie's gonna explode, it's gonna self-destruct. And I just love that feeling.
Yeah. And through the first half of the film, which by the way, the second half of the film, which I do want to talk about, I
Are you
did
talking about
not.
like the second when you say the second half, do you mean like basically like when the FBI gets involved basically?
Yes.
Yeah, that part's funny. Yeah, okay, yeah.
If you would have told me going into this film that it was going to go in that direction,
Yeah, that's
0% chance.
crazy. It's so funny.
It's just, it becomes so uniquely absurd in a
Hmm.
lot of ways that I never would have expected for this piece. But in the first half of the film, I spent a lot of time thinking, this is extremely similar to An American in Paris. I mean, you
Oh,
got
you mean like with the painting thing and all that
the
shit.
painting thing.
They even have the scene where he like dances and sings with the kids.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Gene Kelly is a much more affable guy than Dean
Yes.
Martin. I'm pretty sure Dean Martin in real life was a horrific monster and drunk. Um, as I'm pretty sure he was. Jerry Lewis was an
Yeah.
asshole, but I don't think he was a drunk.
hmm
He was a huge asshole. In fact, Will Sloan, writer, movie critic Will Sloan of Canadian origin, he wrote a review for this movie and he said like it's crazy that Jerry Lewis like he said I mean he made a very sexist comment where he's basically just like oh women aren't funny, but he
hmm
worked alongside Shirley MacLaine. So it's like, what are you talking about, bro? So yeah, I mean, like they're both assholes, but I think Dean Martin is especially an asshole,
hmm
and obviously Gene Kelly, much more affable guy, much better actor than Dean Martin. But I think Dean Martin he comes off as kind of affable in the movie, even though he's kind of like a creep in the movie still. Like I don't know how the movie does it. He just kind of comes out a little bit unscathed. It's kind of weird. I don't understand.
Yeah. There's this nice parallel between Gene Kelly and Dean Martin, and then Stanley Donen and Jerry Lewis, which of course they all have their own shticks, but there's
Yeah.
definitely a similarity between kind of those things, and it's almost like there's this. Well, it's interesting because these movies they came out like very close to each other within I think like within a year or two of each other. So it's almost
Hmm.
like what's the idea? It's called like parallel thought when two people have like simultaneously the same thought and they're not necessarily
Sure, yeah,
based off
yeah.
each other. They just happen to be the same thing. And I would say that
I-
that's a lot of the case. And Shirley MacLaine, she's in An American in Paris.
she is.
I'm pretty sure. I need to look this up. I am pretty
I
sure
think
she
you're
is
wrong
in.
about that.
Let me see.
Like one of the lead characters? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't know why I thought she was in. I guess
She is
she's
not in that
not.
movie. She's in musicals, like she's been
She's
in
in a lot of
musicals. Like
musicals.
she
Yeah.
sings in this movie. She sung in a lot of musicals. She's in like
Hmm.
a Bob Fosse musical from '69 that looks good called Sweet Charity, which I would like to watch someday. It's on
Hmm.
Criterion as well. So, and in a Vincent Minnelli movie, that she's been in other
She's
Vincent
in a
Minnelli
Vincent
movies.
Minnelli movie, just not
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Vincent Minnelli. That's
She's in
probably
Some Came Running, which apparently is very good.
right. That's right.
Hmm.
But point being, there's a lot of similarities.
Whatever. It's all the same. These people are all the same. They
They're
can
all
be
the
kind of
same person.
interchangeable. Yeah. They can be kind of interchangeable. And American in Paris, very, very bright, colorful movie. This movie is also
Hmm.
very bright and colorful. Honestly, though, if I'm gonna like choose one over the other, artists and models, that's the movie for me. Like for me, that is this. So the movie's directed by Frank Tashlin, who
Hmm.
before he started making movies, he directed Looney Tunes cartoons.
Right.
So he's like a Looney Tunes director, and he went on to be like a film director. And I mean, you can see that in there. I don't think he necessarily like goes all the way with it, but this is a subject that's very interesting because one of the greatest movies ever made, of course, is Gremlins 2. And that to me is like basically like a Looney Tunes live action
Hmm.
movie, basically, which is it's very interesting and it's very amazing. So I kind of like this movie's very interesting to me, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of physical comedy.
Hmm.
It's a very physical movie, and as you're kind of
Yeah.
saying, it's constantly bursting at the seams. Like it feels at any
Hmm.
moment that this film could almost explode. Like it can't fit the energy of just all of the
Yeah.
different things that are going on, and especially because this film, plot wise, is just so like it just
It's so good.
it's
I
so
love
good,
it.
and it just like stacks on itself and just gets like more and more
Yeah.
absurd. And in each moment is kind of just adding upon the last moment. And you're like, well, it can't like get any weirder, any stranger than this. And then they'll add something else.
Yep.
And then it just keeps going and going. And then you have that moment where suddenly the FBI is involved and communist Soviet Russia is,
They're like Hungarians or something like that. They're
I
Russians,
guess.
Hungarians. They said Hungarians because the lady says she's like from Hungary. The honeypot lady.
Yeah.
Um, so but it
But they're
whatever. It
from the
doesn't really
Soviet
matter.
Union, right? Because the idea is
Right? Yeah, yeah,
it's the
yeah. They're
space race
Soviets.
going
Yeah,
on, and
yeah. The space race is going on. Yeah, yeah. That thrown in, I just makes the movie. I do think like if I had to give like a criticism to the movie, it feels a little bit too long.
Mhm.
Um, because it's like almost 2 hours long, and it's like, it's kind of, it's things are kind of getting a little stretched out, I think, by the time it ends. But I wouldn't want to do anything with the space race, like FBI spy stuff. That stuff like gets introduced and it goes like it flies by really quickly where they're just like you're right, like dead, like the energy of that part is just crazy. And up to that point too, the energy of the movie is great. It just it's a pretty like good like musical. Um like I wouldn't say any of the songs are particularly amazing. I mean, the artist and model song is pretty good. And you know what? The song that Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin sang about pretending like in the beginning, that's a
Oh
really good
yeah.
song. Where he's like pretending to play the piano. That stuff is
Yeah.
really fun.
I think that's Jerry Lewis has some great gags in here, and like I said,
Yeah.
he's given
He's
that
super
Jerry Lewis
physical.
shit. He is. He's
He's
a very
super fit. Like
physical.
when they're like on top of each other and they're wrapping each other at the uh massage like therapy place. That was
Yeah.
making me laugh.
Oh,
I
that's
like
one of
when
my
he's got
favorite
the jug of
scenes.
water where the water is going everywhere. That was making me laugh. He made me laugh a lot in the movie. He's really good in it. He's amazing.
That scene where they're all piling on, it's it's such a simple concept, but Jerry Lewis has this. really intriguing way of playing with it, where the idea is he's like stuck in this position. I can't remember why he's stuck in this position. Oh, because he was modeling, I think.
He was
Is
modeling and he got himself stuck
he
or
got
whatever.
himself stuck.
And so they need to go to this massage place. And he's
And
like, okay, okay, grab this and grab this leg and then put it over here. Like, oh, he's so funny. He's got a very silly voice too. He's got a very kind of like silly voice that he puts on where
mm,
it's like kind of high and kind of like a
yeah,
cartoon character, basically. And you know what? This movie too, and I'm sure other Tashlin movies are like this. You can see a lot of like Lewis's own like directing style kind of. You can kind of
yeah.
see it in there. So I'm sure I probably read that he was, but like I'm pretty sure he probably very much was influenced by Tashlin.
I'm sure there's definitely a lot of influencer, and I'm sure Lewis had a lot of creative comments because, of course, Lewis famously, and one of the reason the French love Lewis so much is he was very specific in what he liked and what he didn't like,
Right,
and
the total filmmaker,
yeah,
as
he's the
he's
true
as
auteur,
the
which
title
is
of his book was.
which is crazy that Jerry Lewis is the original,
Yeah,
like the auteur
he's a great
role
example
model.
of it.
I mean,
Yeah,
he
yeah, he's a
is.
great
It's just so
example.
strange that
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean like people I mean that's the thing about Jerry Lewis and thank God like with like Letterboxd and like other kind of like, movie review guys like Will Sloan who like him a lot, I never really like I don't think I really would have ever gone him out of way to watch his movies, but then I did, and
yeah.
you're just like, man, these are so good. Like they're so funny and creative and wild,
Mhm.
and they're weird, and they're kind of like nonsensical in a little bit, like, they're truly, truly kind of like personal visions of him, a very kind of misunderstood guy, I think. And the fact that he like called himself like the total filmmaker and everything, is just so great. And he's an asshole, but like he definitely did what he wanted to do for the most part. So we got to do another Jerry Lewis movie. We need to do Ladies Man someday, I
Yeah,
think.
that I mean, I remember when we talked about that film because for
So
some reason
good.
we had like a long break before we did the Jerry Lewis one. I think we had like 2 or 3 weeks, and you
Yeah.
had gone on this Jerry Lewis extravaganza, and
Hmm.
we talked a lot about it. And I'd love to get back into some more Jerry Lewis. So that's and he is definitely one of those performances. And although honestly, all of the performances in this in great, Jerry Lewis gives his shtick.
No,
Dean Martin's fine.
the four people are good.
Yeah.
When they're working together, in the different configurations that they work together, the movie is great. Like, and that again, that scene where he's singing the pretending song at the beginning,
Hmm.
they work off each other really well. I don't,
Yeah.
nothing feels too strained to me, in my opinion. D. Martin, he does the straight man thing, and he feels like a little bit too button up.
Yeah.
Occasionally, like it kind of feels like he's not. He all in turn. I know again, he's doing the straight guy thing, and that's kind of like their thing, right? He's a straight guy. Jerry Lewis is really kind of like playing it up, how silly and wacky he is. He's making
Hmm.
all these funny faces and stuff. But even D. Martin, to an extent, does feel a little bit too like, I don't know, uh, unemotional or just kind
Hmm.
of held back, holding a lot back.
And we see that a lot with they're not even really musicians turned actors. They're musicians who became actors to further their
Was Jerry
musical
Lewis a
career.
musician?
No, not Jerry Lewis. Dean Martin.
Oh, D. Martin. Yeah, yeah. D. Martin. Yeah,
Dean
yeah. D.
Martin.
Martin, like he's a singer. And the thing about this musical, by the way, calling it a musical is just like I don't even know if that's
Eh,
even like appropriate. Most of the songs are just like sung by D. Martin. He
it's
sings like
mostly Dean
three or
Martin.
four songs, and then
Yeah.
I think like Shirley MacLaine sings a song, and Jerry Lewis I think like sings a song with people. But I think for the most part, just like Dean Martin singing, and
Hmm.
for the most part.
Yeah.
He doesn't dance either, though. Shirley MacLaine and Jerry Lewis, they dance.
They do.
Well, I forget. D. Martin does do a little bit of like tap dancing. Again, Gene Kelly
I
definitely has some
guess.
beat there. Once again,
Yeah.
watching Gene Kelly tap dance is much more engaging than watching Dean Martin do it for like 5 seconds. But whatever. That's just kind of like a funny thing about that movie.
Yeah, it reminds me of why do I remember that? Oh, so last semester for my mythology class, we did like American myths, and one of the American myths we did was the myth of Elvis Presley. The idea of getting these real people and how companies and studios would create this illusion of who these people were. And Elvis Presley, he legitimately wanted to be an actor. Like he wanted to work in that world.
Yeah.
But if you've ever seen
I've
Elvis,
never seen any of those movies.
I think the only reason you would watch an Elvis Presley movie is if you love Elvis Presley, that's a good reason. And, there's some good songs in them, but one of the problems and one of the reasons he sort of never made his way in the world of acting, although right before he died, he was going to be in the third reincarnation of A Star is Born, which I think would have been
Mm.
really intriguing. Of course, he died before he could play that role, so it was taken over by, oh gosh, who ended up doing that? I can't remember. But the reason he failed as an actor is because the studio wanted him to always play Elvis Presley. So he always had to kind of play the straight man, uh,
Mm.
sort of character, right? He always had to be like the cool guy. He can never sort
Right.
of show any sort of emotions. He can never be anything but the hero. And because of that, that even though he's actually in like half, I think he's in like a dozen films. He made like two
He's in a
films
lot
a
of movies,
year.
yeah.
He's in a surprising amount of movies, even though he didn't live to be that old. And he was off, with his music career and all the other stuff he was doing in his life. But the reason no one really remembers any of those movies, other than the fact that Elvis Presley is in them, is because they're just like this meaningless films that were only made, right? They are only built to
Yeah, they're very
further the
disposable.
career of
Yeah.
Elvis Presley. Like they have no other reason to exist, which is
Yeah.
certainly not the case with this. I mean, Dean Martin's in it, and there are a lot of Dean Martin films where the only reason that film exists is because they're trying to
Yeah.
further the career of Dean Martin. This isn't that case at all.
There's probably a lot of Frank Sinatra
Frank
movies
Sinatra
too that are
stuff like
like
that
that,
too.
right? Because he's
But Frank
probably in a lot of
Sinatra's,
movies and a lot of them suck. And he was in Manchurian Candidate and he was good
yeah,
in
he
that
was in
movie.
Manchurian
Yeah.
Candidate. He's in From
Yeah,
Here to Eternity.
yeah, like, and I'm sure Elvis, like, he probably could have played a Manchurian Candidate type,
Hmm.
performance, like something outside of just playing a rock and roll star,
Yeah.
uh, and it probably would have been fine, Frank Sinatra, he's like decent in that movie, and for, hey, Manchurian Candidate, everybody loves that movie, everybody sees it, and he's in it. That's great, more people get to see him, so I think it makes a lot more sense, like, again, like the Elvis movies are very disposable. Artists and Models
Mhm.
is not a disposable movie,
No.
and I don't even necessarily like they're probably like really fucking famous at this point, right? Like Martin and Lewis, like they're
Yes.
probably very
Oh
famous.
yeah.
Um, when did D. Martin die? He died. I have it in front of me. He died in 95, so he actually lived longer than I thought.
Yeah, he was
Um,
old when he died, wasn't he? Was he like
he
an old
died
man?
at 78.
Oh, well,
Um,
he's not young.
so yeah, I mean, like, Lewis and Martin, they're famous, they're at the top of their game, and I think probably soon after this they parted.
Hmm.
So I guess maybe they don't really like need this movie at this point, right? It's just, but I'm glad they made it because
Yeah.
I love it.
And the whole plot line, which is the peak of this plot line, which there's a lot of plot lines going on that sort of intersect with each other and go
Yeah,
back and forth, is this idea that comic books, which is kind of the same argument that we had when we were kids,
with like
uh,
video games and
with
stuff.
video games, that
Yeah,
comic
comic books
books
make you
were
stupid
make you
and
stupid
violent.
and violent.
Yeah,
And there's this moment where, for some reason, uh, J- she brings Jerry Lewis onto this television show
hmm
to talk about how comic books are ruining us. And Jerry Lewis is he is the example of what
of
happens when
why
you
comic
read.
books. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And he just goes off on this just absurd tangent that just makes him look like the stupidest man in the entire world. And he
He's
just
really
keeps
funny.
going. I mean, he just ad-libs this amazing speech that is
I don't know
just
what program this is. Like a lot of things don't make sense. Like what is this program? Like what is it for? Like, you know, the Dorothy Malone character, it's like she's on there because she used to do comic books and now she hates them or something. Like it's very odd. I think like the scene
her.
too happens like what?
Yeah. No, go
What are you
ahead.
saying? No.
No, her story arc is the strangest
Yeah. Because she
of
made
the
that
four,
lady.
because she's the original creator of
Yeah.
Bat Lady, but
Yeah.
then they fire her because she doesn't show blood. She's not violent enough.
Mhm.
So then instead they hire Dean Martin, who
To make the vulture.
steals Jerry Lewis's ideas
Yeah, his idea is that he blurts out while he's sleeping.
while
Like
he's
he sleeps
sleeping.
talks and he blurts out these like crazy, I don't know, things.
And somehow Jerry Lewis never realizes this. I don't think he never realizes this, right?
So okay, so this was something I realized after like a day after watching the movie. Like Dean Martin, he steals Jerry Lewis's idea for like this comic book, and
Yes.
he also doesn't want to show the Dorothy Malone character. He doesn't want him to know that he's stealing the idea, and he also doesn't want Dorothy Malone to know that like he basically has her
Took her
job now.
job. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like there's never a revelation
I
of
don't think
either the
there is.
Dorothy Malone character or
No.
Jerry Lewis character finding out that Dean Martin stole his idea and also stole her job essentially. I was like, they never. I realized that like they never.
Mhm.
Unless I missed something, I don't think they ever
No.
found out about that. So like, there's never like a revelation or Dean Martin apologizing or anything like that. The closest thing is like Dean Martin, it just quits out of nowhere. Like he shows him the really explosive gun, which is very very funny, and
Hmm.
he's like, I quit, just like that. I guess he just leaves.
That's a really
Um,
cool effect. That
oh,
it, I
where it
think
looks like an explosion
I
coming out of
think
the
what they
gun.
did is
That's very cartoon.
it's like a mushroom cloud, right? And so
Yeah,
they
yeah.
basically like overlaid
Layered it, yeah,
a mushroom cloud on top
to make it
of the
look like it's
film.
shooting out of the
So it
toy
looks
gun or
like it's
whatever. It's
shooting
very
like
silly.
a ray.
And he's like, I quit, and like, okay. So yeah, there's it's so weird that there's no like you know
No, because
revelation of like, oh wow.
because they've immediately left that world of comic books, and
Yeah.
because Jerry Lewis apparently for some reason, and this is never explained because why would it be? He has somehow figured out some secret formula that the US military,
Yeah, this is gonna need some. Yeah, so like they put like a formula in the Vulture comic that Dean Martin stole from Jerry Lewis,
yes,
and there's like a space race, and the United States have figured out how to like put a space station in
in
space,
space,
and the army guys are like, look at this comic book, the Vulture comic book. It's called what
because
is it called?
everyone's reading it,
Yeah,
which is
everyone's
a
reading it.
hilarious gag.
Look at what my son is reading or whatever. Because yeah, it's like a popular comic book now. I guess you didn't have iPhones or
No, it makes
whatever, so
sense. Yeah.
and they're like, look at this, and like it has half of our formula. For some reason, Jerry Lewis conceived of half of the formula for like the space station, and so they freak out, and it sets off like this like crazy just kind of like third like it's just like the last 30 minutes of the movie in which like there's like spying and like the Soviets are trying to like honeypot Dean Martin and like his and then his girlfriend gets mad about it and then it's just like this becomes this whole thing and then they go to like a castle at the, it's just like it's a pretty like wild kind of circuitous thing that sort of like comes out of nowhere. It's like its own movie basically. I love it.
It's it's so different from the rest of the movie, and you're right. It is almost kind of movie. You could almost watch that part of the movie on its own, and it's kind of like its own short film because,
Well,
well, I mean, it doesn't really have anything to do with the rest of the
not
movie.
really, no. Well, I will say that like you said it has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. And yeah, it's like basically like you think like oh it's a comedy musical and then they kind of add in this sort of like random um kind of espionage
Hmm.
thing. But I don't know. I think it fits. I
It
think
does.
the
It
whole thing
works.
fits aesthetically. Yeah, yeah. It's just kind
Yeah,
of like the silly kind of nature. And then and you know what we're talking about with the toy gun and stuff like that. Occasionally the movie it doesn't go all the way, but occasionally the movie will kind of like sort of like sort of suggest that like there's kind of like a cartoon level of like
hmm,
logic in the movie's world
yeah,
just but only occasionally.
yeah. Like that scene where it's Shirley MacLaine and Jerry Lewis, and
Hmm.
Shirley MacLaine, I think she's singing about her love for Jerry Lewis, or something to
Yeah,
that
yeah, are you
effect.
talking about where they're on the stairs?
Where they're on the stairs.
That's great. She's so cute. She's so
She's
fucking
so cute.
awesome. I love her.
She's amazing. And Jerry
Hmm.
Lewis is. his whole goal in that scene is just to climb up the stairs. And of course, every time
Yeah.
she starts to sing, he
He keeps
falls
like
down.
falling. Yeah.
Which is a
Yeah, that's
great
funny.
is a
He does it like
great
3 or 4
physical
times and he
gag.
falls, he
Oh yeah, and
falls.
that last one where he you can tell he like kind of has to like situate himself so he doesn't break himself because he goes from the top of the stairs and then
Yeah.
falls on top of like the
He's so
beach
fucking
chair
awesome.
or something that he's on and he goes all the way down the stairs. It's very impressive and just a very physical
Yeah.
thing to do. And the
Which
fact
Dean
that
Martin does not do. Dean
no,
Martin, he stands around and he sits down. He doesn't do anything. Very
I don't even
physical.
think D. Martin runs. I don't even think he runs like in that last scene.
Maybe a little bit. Maybe at the last.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe. I'm not confident.
He had too many cigarettes and scotches that day, and he was just like, I can't do
No.
it.
That cast, I forgot about that castle scene until you brought it up again. Because I was thinking about, because I remember the part where they're doing the artists and models scene, which is kind of like that
Well,
the
by the
big
way,
moment in musicals.
what event is this? Like what? Like who? Like what? Like the artists and models ball? Like
I
what
have no
is it? Like a
idea.
club? Is it
I
like
don't
is it a
know. I don't get
company?
it.
Like is it like a like
And why were
it,
Jerry
it,
Lewis and Dean Martin hired to do this together?
they're artists and they work with models.
But
So it's the artists and models.
isn't Jerry Lewis supposed to be like a writer?
Um, sure, an artist, an art, a writer could be an artist.
I mean, I guess, but
I, yeah,
I have
I
no
don't.
idea what this event is.
No, that's the thing. It, what I don't even know. It's like it's so funny how like they're like we got to go to the artists and models ball. They don't explain what it is or why they have to
Nope.
do like the stage antics like or anything like that. Like, are they like also known for this? Are they known for like their incredible
Some sort of
stage
singing duo?
singing kind of performance duo, kind of like Martin and Lewis in real life.
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't understand. Like, it's just like it's totally. And that scene too, where like they finish doing their singing and they go in the audience and they paint like the backs of like models and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And it's funny. Um, that scene goes on forever.
That
It's
scene
just
goes on
like
for
it's
quite a
completely.
while.
And again, it's just like, what is this event for? Is it a fundraiser? Is it just a part? Like, I don't understand.
No
So
idea.
it doesn't matter.
Or why are they at a castle? I
That's
don't
just where
understand.
the again I don't know. It's just where the Hungarians are for some reason. They're at like like a big mansion castle looking thing. I love too. Like they are like Jerry Lewis gets like abducted. And they're like, "Oh fuck, Jerry Lewis got abducted. We gotta go."
Mhm.
And they go to the castle, and they have this, they have this fucking big scene, this big crazy scene where like I was laughing so hard when they were throwing the Knights of
The
the
armor.
armor because they kept on throwing them. Like I was laughing so much. It's so funny. And then they still make it in time for their performance to sing at the end of the ball. That made me laugh so much, dude. It's so funny. They
There's
drive all the way out there, and it's clearly filmed during the day. It's like not
yeah.
night,
Yeah,
but
day
like
for night.
yeah,
It's
it's day for
clearly like
night,
the
and
middle of the day. There's
it's
shadows and
blue.
shit.
They're
Yeah.
outside, and it's like blue and stuff. But then they do this whole thing, and then they are able to drive back in the ball, just in time to like finish it, I guess. It's so funny.
I love it. You would think like I feel like when we talk about this movie and people who haven't seen this movie listen to this, it almost sounds so absurd that it wouldn't work, like it wouldn't fit. But there's something about this film, like
It's just that directing. I think it's
yeah,
just the directing.
it's like the way he's designed this piece that you have this weird sort of bind. And this is something I talk a lot about with my students because I have students who kind of have these fantastical worlds that they want to create and they want to write about. And one of the problems is often there's no way for us to sort of exist in this world. Like there's no rules of this world. There's no way for this world to exist. And so there's no buy-in from our audience. And yet with this piece, I think it's because like yes, that moment with sort of the space race stuff and the castle and that paint the artist and model thing, like yes, it's 100% absurd and it doesn't make any sense at all. But I think it works because the beginning of this film is a very traditional American musical. Like it hits all of the basic tropes at the beginning of the movie. You have the odd couple
Yeah.
type characters who,
Yeah, it's pretty, yeah.
are out of, sort of out of luck and they're these poor artists and they're trying to figure shit out.
Hmm.
and it slowly edges its way to just this moment of complete absurdity. But because it's the slow ramp up, because it doesn't happen all at once, it doesn't just like hit you in the head with it. It works in this really weird and interesting and strange way.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. It's like just kind of like um like I don't know, it just kind of feels like a movie that's like kind of that is taking chances, right? Because it's like Martin and Lewis are really funny and famous
Mhm.
at this time. Let's just do like a a medium shot of them talking or whatever, and Jerry Lewis will do funny faces. Jerry Lewis doesn't just do funny faces; he does so many crazy things in this movie. He has great line readings. He falls over and stuff. He's super great. And then yeah, I just think like yeah, like it's combination of all these like different subjects like comic books and stuff like that comic books like cause like violence and stuff is very funny and you can kind of again take that issue and kind of like map it into other things,
Mhm.
some whatever in discussion, TikTok, video games, whatever you want to call it. Um and again, I just like that it's able to kind of like has sort of this kind of like uh just kind of like hyperness to it that I think makes it easy to watch, and really fun to watch. It's legitimately fun to watch. Um, but again, there's probably many movies made in the 50s. I think you could agree, where it's just medium shots of people talking.
Yeah.
And
I
again,
mean,
I think that Tashlin directing is just that's what that's the difference. I think, and a
oh,
couple other elements like all the cast members, those four core cast members are make the movie swim by really easily.
yeah, there's a lot of strong points of this film, and honestly, I think one of the weakest points, which is strange for me because I love a great musical. I love the music of this era. It's very hard for me not to love it. And it's not that the music in this film is bad. It's just
It's
other
fine.
other than the pretending song and the song with Shirley MacLaine and Jerry Lewis. I think a lot of the music is pretty forgettable in this
Yeah,
film. I mean, it's fine, and it's always great to hear Dean Martin. I think Dean Martin, whether he's an asshole or not, or if he's a good actor or not, he does have a great voice. Like that is one thing that
hmm
he genuinely deserves to be celebrated for, and so it is great
yeah,
to
he
see
is.
Dean Martin, even if like he can't really dance, and
He's not a great actor.
he's not a great actor. He's not very physical. Uh, but he does have a great voice. So it is great. It always is great to hear him
Yeah, it's a
sing.
pleasure.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess like the musical elements are just kind of like it's not the whole movie. It's only like part of
No,
it. Calling it a musical is kind of hard to say,
I wouldn't say
if it
it's a
is or not.
musical. I mean,
It's a little it's
it
got
definitely
the,
has elements of a musical. It
it
looks
ends like a musical. It ends
it
like
ends
every
like a
musical
musical.
that's ever been made during this point in
Yeah.
time, like where everybody kind of like stands together and sings.
Hmm.
Although American in Paris doesn't really end like that, it ends very differently. But yeah, like them singing together at the end is very like okay, yeah,
Very
very
common.
musical. Yeah,
Hmm.
very common. But that's why it's good, right? Because it's like it's not just like one thing, it's like a bunch of different things, which makes the movie like unique and fun to watch rather than if they went all the way with the musical thing and every 10 minutes they sing a song, that would be kind of I think that would be like a little much for me personally. Like I think it would be kind of hard to watch where it was just like 10 minutes every 10 minutes there's a song or whatever. Um and yeah, like the music, Dean Martin, he's just kind of like crooning, right? He's just kind of like crooning
Hmm.
to people. It's like, like that's kind of what he does. So it's not really like that amazing, but he's a great singer, like you said. So it is a pleasure. Um, 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 but yeah, for me, like I just, again, I just find it really kind of, um, I'm glad that Tashlin directed it because I think considering his Looney Tunes background, it just
Hmm.
kind of feels like he kind of has this overactiveness to him that really kind of aids to a movie, especially this old.
Yeah. Wow. I think one of the things I struggled with this movie is when I was watching it, it's like I'm not exactly sure how to talk about this movie because I mean, on the one end, it's kind of specially made specifically for our weird and specific interests, and
I
it
agree.
it fits all those things together in this really interesting puzzle. And so in that sense, it's like this perfect film. But on the other hand, it is so strange and
I love it.
specific
Yeah.
that, and I don't say this often on the podcast, but which I guess like a lot of the people who listen to this podcast don't watch the movie before they listen to it, which feels weird to me. I feel like,
I don't think it matters.
I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. Like if you're just interested, but I think this is, I think a lot of them are fine if you don't, right? If you like understand the basic concept of the plot, it doesn't really matter. But I do think with this film, you really do have to see it. Like it's, I think we could
Well, I
spend all
would just
day
say you.
talking about it.
I just think it like whether you watch it before or after, you ought to watch it. You know, because
I mean, yeah.
it's great. You know, it's on Criterion. You know, it's fucking awesome. Yeah, and again, you know, it looks great. Looks great. Great looking movie too. You know, just like great
Mhm.
colors, great you know, really fun sets. I love like the comic book publisher set where he's got like all these like
Yeah.
dead animals around. That's a very specific choice. And I like that actor too. That guy is a kind of a weird standout as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I love all the sets here, and there is this certain, which I like about this film, is of course a lot of the films of this time were shot on sets because it is significantly cheaper to shoot on a set than it is to shoot on a location, particularly during this time when sound isn't necessarily in the early stages like 1920s and 30s, but it's not to the degree that it is now where you can go and shoot on location and just bring a microphone. I mean, if you're not on a set, sound was pretty much shit. So they were very limited in what they can do. And by leaning into sort of the facade aspects of it, right? Leaning into the
Yeah.
sets as the sets kind of get bigger and more absurd throughout the piece. Like it's almost as if the sets themselves kind of change throughout the film and they become more absurdist. I mean, not to the degree of something like M or so that German expressionism. It's not going to that extent,
Yeah.
but
I don't think
there is
so.
definitely this embracing of the fake, the unreal, and because we don't start there, because it sort of leans us into
Mhm.
it. I don't think you notice it on a conscious level. It's more of this subconscious thing where the way rooms work doesn't really make a whole lot of sense at some point, and suddenly like
Yeah.
the rooms start to feel like too really big or really small. Like they never feel
Rooms
like
feel
the right
really
size
they feel fake because they are.
because they
You know, like
are.
they feel like fake like their apartment is like way too big, you know,
Yeah.
and they're supposed to be poor, right? Like right and uh and the movie I will say kind of has kind of like this unevenness with this comedy too, like when they just for some reason decide to reference Rear Window.
I
Where it's
love
just
that.
like, what? They're referencing Rear Window?
That's
Like they're
just
just
like
making like a
right out
really
of
kind of like
nowhere.
it's like a very like I think it was just that feels like something that they were like, oh, we should like put in a Rear Window joke because everybody likes that movie or whatever. And so like that comes out of nowhere. You're just like, wait, why? Like we're referencing other movies. Like that feels very Looney Tunes to me. That feels very like Gremlins 2, like Joe
Mhm.
Dante type shit of like kind of like referencing like a movie outright like that. It's like the only like kind of reference, at least as far as my ability and knowledge that I could tell,
To another
like
film.
outright from like just kind of like outright like you know sort of like referencing or you know another movie entirely. So that was just like okay, all right, like I guess so.
And it doesn't
But
have
I
anything
love
to
it.
do with the movie at all. Like it's
No,
it's out of nowhere.
it's just a gag. It's just like a
It's just a
gag that they put
gag.
in.
A great gag. I
it,
love that gag.
it the movie comes really close to being kind of like one of those kind of like you know Zucker Brothers kind of Joe Dante kind of
Yeah.
gag a minute movies where it's like one gag after another, but it doesn't go that far. It
Mm.
paces itself more slowly than that with especially like the musical pieces and things like that. But it gets close, and I you kind of see the DNA there.
Hmm. And this reminded me of my second favorite gag, which my first favorite gag is the masseuse scene because that is just
It's really funny.
it's peak physical comedy and just the way they're all
Yeah,
moving
it's
their
good.
bodies and legs and again one of those scenes that like all the nurses except for the masseuse lady are like these scantily clad uh
Yeah, like
big
when they
bosomed
bring in
women.
when they bring in like the second nurse, I was
Yeah, they're like way
laughing
too
so
beautiful.
much. I was like, oh, God. He was like, oh, we need a second nurse.
Yeah,
It's like, and Jerry Lewis, like the way that he talks in that scene and stuff is really, really funny too. He sounds great.
he has that great voice. And my second favorite gag is that moment very early on when Jerry Lewis goes up and he runs into the Bat Lady. And so he
Yeah.
sprints down the stairs. Oh, there's another gag too. I'll get to that gag next.
You see,
But
it's just one of those movies where it's like one after another. It's just
there's so
like
many great
you remember,
gags.
like, yeah.
And he sprints down the stairs and he runs into the
Hmm.
apartment and he runs into the room. And at that moment, we realize that he's not, for some
He
reason,
went,
all of the apartments look exactly the same.
he went a floor two. He
He
went
went a
down
floor
one more
down.
floor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he went down too far. And so woke up the fat lady, as he calls her,
Yeah.
and she yells him and then he runs
Yeah,
back
there's
up.
that.
And then there's
And
that
he's like,
extremely long gag that just goes on where
because they're like the
the
bat
fat
lady and the
lady and the
fat
bat
lady. Yeah,
lady.
yeah,
He has
that's
to go
very
back and
like
forth,
who's on
back.
first. It's like a who's on first type,
Yeah.
like exchange. Yeah.
And and then that reminds me of another great gag is that moment where Dean Martin is in the bathtub
Oh yeah, that
and the
killed me
phone.
too. Really funny. There's something kind of like homoerotic about that scene too, where he's just kind of like talking to him. I know
Yes.
they're brothers in the movie, but they're like he's like
There's
in the
definitely
bathtub and he's like gets in the bathtub and he like fucks around with it and stuff like that. They kind of have like a weird. Their chemistry together is so weird. They just kind of have like this weird. I don't know. Like I don't know.
yeah.
There's something about it.
There's definitely something about it. But just watching Jerry Lewis run up and down these stairs, and he's running. I mean, they legitimately have him
No, he
run up and
does.
down the
You watch him
stairs.
do it. It's not like a thing where it's like they cut him.
They cut.
I think maybe
I
they
mean, they
don't
don't show
show
the
him
whole
walk up
thing,
every
but
like flight of
still,
stairs.
that
Um,
man is sprinting upstairs.
right, yeah. And I just love like yeah, like he's so out of breath that he has to like basically do. I was losing my mind at that scene because he's so out of breath he can't talk that he has to do like charades in
He
order
does
to
like a
tell
whole
Dean Martin
charades.
that he wants to like um the publisher guy wants to meet Dean Martin, and it's just
Hmm.
like this totally kind of uh like it goes on for forever, and it's just like, wait, how long is a sentence? How long is the sentence that Jerry Lewis is trying to tell Dean
Yeah.
Martin? You know, you're just like, is this gonna? How long is this gonna take? I love jokes like that where it's just kind of like it feels like a part of the joke is that like it just keeps going.
It
You
just
know,
keeps
it just
going.
keeps
Like that's the
go.
joke in and of itself is that it goes way too long. Like that's what makes the joke work so well is the joke
I
should have
love
been
that.
like way before. No, I think that's great. And
Hmm.
I think you need someone like Jerry Lewis to kind of have a specific energy because if you don't have that energy in a joke like that, it will
Right?
not
Yeah.
work. And he'll just keep pushing. Like he'll just keep going and
Hmm.
going and going.
It's like it's kind of like sort of like a version of like what a slow core movie might do, where
Mm.
they might like have like a shot, and a shot will go on for like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes long. I think it's kind of I get the same effect where I'm just kind of like, yo, like how long is this gonna be? Like how long is this gonna take? How long can this shot of just like a tree, like how can it keep going? Or like this person walking down the street, like how long is it? How long are they gonna have this like go for? And the same
Mhm.
thing with some of the jokes that Jerry Lewis does, where you're just like, oh man, how long are they gonna keep doing this? Are they gonna do another? Are they gonna do another? It's just I again it's kind of like part of that energy where you just kind of feel like the seams are like coming apart. You feel like it's just gonna explode, but it never does. It doesn't explode.
Yeah. Well, that puts us at just about an hour here. Is there anything else we should point out, hit on before we get into our final
I
thoughts?
also like the publisher, the weird like another kind of like superfluous gag is like where he has like his like the family member of like the comic book publisher who's always like the same lady. It's like, oh, it's my cousin, it's my sister, it's my wife.
I
It's
love
like,
that guy.
and the Dean Martin just basically like tells the kind of explains the
He
joke where he's just
explains the
like,
joke
I don't
at
know
the
who
end
that
of
is. Yeah, yeah. I remember that gag too, but yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of jokes that I'm forgetting.
Hmm. Wow. What a movie. What a movie. I'll give my final thoughts here on artists and models. So I am extremely familiar with the genre in which it is poking fun at, playing with, and also working in, which is the 1950s musical end of the studio era, but still part of the studio era. But you can see the studio era sort of losing its grip on what it means to make these kinds of films. And this film, on its opening and towards the beginning of the film, it definitely plays with all these things, and it seems very much just like your traditional American Paris style film, where you're gonna have your straight man Dean Martin and your funny guy Jerry Lewis. They're gonna come together. Your classic odd couple, right? They fall in
They're gonna
love,
hit it
blah blah blah
big.
blah. Artists, they give up some shit, and that's the end of it. And that's gonna be the film. And throughout the film, I am just constantly surprised by just the gags and the length that they'll go and just the plot line that just gets more and more absurd and yet always works. And I think this can only work under some really great direction and a cast that is definitely willing to buy into this, specifically Shirley MacLaine and Jerry Lewis, who are definitely the two standout performances, though every performance in this, honestly, is incredible. But I think their performances in
Yeah,
particular,
yeah,
especially when those two are together, like they just work really well together. I
yeah. They're
mean,
good.
some of two of the funniest people of this era put in the same room is just like such a treat to be part of, and it is visually it's shot in VistaVision, and so you have these like really beautiful bright colors, and just watching the physicality of people like Shirley MacLaine and Jerry Lewis is just so fun to watch. And like I said, if there's really any complaints to be had, which there's not a lot for me, I think one of the complaints is it might run a little bit too long. But as you're saying, like if you look at all of the gags, like I wouldn't want to take any of the gags out. And that's the only way you can shorten this piece is by taking out
Uh-huh.
one of the gags. And I don't want to lose any of those gags. So I don't know how you would go about shortening this piece, making this piece any shorter than it is. And it's not like it's that long. I mean, it's only an hour and 50 minutes. It's not like it's a 3.5 hour film. So it's certainly no slog at all. And some of the music can be a bit forgettable. I mean, I probably couldn't hum a single tune from this film, but that's true with a lot of musicals. I think a lot of musicals, the music is kind of
Yeah,
you don't remember it. And there, of course, there's plenty of great exceptions, but that's kind of the music of this era. And just hearing Dean Martin sing is always a good time, even if he's not really a good actor or a good person or very physical in his singing. So for me, I'm giving it a solid 8 out of 10.
I think I gotta go. I think I gotta go above and say I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10,
No.
just because like it's kind of like a very like. I think I agree with everything that you said, and I do agree that it is a little bit on the longer side than I would like it to be. But ultimately, like I don't know. I love Jerry Lewis and I love like Shirley MacLaine. So them together, like you said, is amazing, and they're the greatest, comedic actors of this era. And I just love that like Frank Tashlin direction a lot. I would love to see more of his movies. Again, he made like a fuck ton of movies with Jerry Lewis in particular. Um, and I just like kind of like the hyperactiveness of it. It's just it seems a little unusual for its time. There's something kind of like and you pointing out kind of like the sexual elements of it too, where there's just like so many like beautiful women in it that just like keep appearing. It's very very funny and very kind of like there's something kind of like screwball comedy. Well, there are screwball comedies of this time, obviously, but it feels almost like more like an 80s or 70s like screwball
Yeah.
comedy where the sex is even punched up a little bit more, obviously. But I don't know. I laughed a lot. It looks amazing. It's again a very active, fun kind of on the movie that it 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 it, it never lets up. But I think it still keeps his composure, which I think is hard to do. So I don't know. I loved it. Like 9 out of 10 for me.
All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. You can find everything I do at Austin Lugo.
I'm on Letterboxd at Retro Andrew, RTR0 Andrew.
And you can find this podcast wherever your podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. With nothing to say, and thank you all for listening.